So moving on, I guess some questions about evangelism. What would you say to someone who says that street evangelism is more of a deterrent in today's postmodern culture, and that it's more about relational evangelism? And kind of one that kind of goes alongside that is, how do you bring up and preach the gospel then today to someone with a postmodern worldview?
You really can't make a statement like that. I mean, look at some of the things God called His prophets to do. You can't put it in a box. You know, go stand in the street, go preach, do this. You know, some very strange things happened to the prophet Ezekiel. And not to say they're to be imitated, but my whole point is you can't say that street preaching is bad today, or it was good in Whitfield's time. It's always been a scandal. I will say this. There are people who are gifted at street preaching, and I really appreciate them. One of them is my friend Ray Comfort. He is just gifted at street preaching because he can sit there and tell you things, and you may get as mad as a hornet, but you still see the love that he has and the kindness and everything. I see some street preachers today who seem like the only thing they want to do is put up a camera, yell at people, and then when the people persecute them, they want to put it on YouTube and show everybody how martyred they are. Some people should not street preach because they just do not have the gift. It is being able... See, all witnessing is relational. All preaching is relational. It is. Okay? It's just a different way. And if you, like Ray Comfort, he can have 40 people around him and be preaching on the street and be relational to all of them. I mean, it's just his gift. He can work around them. He can talk. Other men, they cannot. And so I would never say street preaching is for this time and not for another time or vice versa. I would just say, are you truly called to do it? Are you truly gifted to do it? Are you also training yourself to do it? Becoming an expert in the Word, an expert in proclamation. And the biggest thing, do people see love? And do you really have good theology? I mean, I'm not going to sit there and preach in the streets. I have preached in the streets, but I'm not going to sit there and just rail against the sins of the people. They're lost. I'm not going to talk if some girl walks by with a short skirt. I'm not going to preach against her short skirt, or a girl has a spike going through her nose or something like that. That doesn't bother me. What I'm going to be out there doing is saying, look, there's life. His name is Jesus. You need Him. And so I see a lot of angry preachers, really angry preachers saying a lot of hurtful things. There are time for everything under heaven. Now, in evangelism, and this comes from someone who has street preached and will again, I find it most effective is to enter into relationships with people. And maybe I'm on a plane and I only have 2 hours. I can still enter into a relationship. And what do I mean? I can simply talk to that person. When I mean that, it doesn't mean I look at them and say, I'm going to tell you the gospel, or you're a sinner, or this. I just start talking to people. And I find out about them. I want to know about them. I want to know how they think. I want to know what they do. I want to know what they like. I want them to see that I'm just not trying to win a number, that I actually love a person that I'm talking to. And I have found out when I do that, I'm almost always granted the opportunity of sharing the gospel. Paris, France is considered one of the most, people have told me, no one wants to hear the gospel, and they'll shut you out and everything. It's not true. I was in Paris last year with my wife, and I was preaching, and I was just walking around the streets of downtown Paris. And what do? You go into a shop. And I saw this guy. He's the last of the manual music box makers in Paris. And I mean, when Pixar needs a music box, they call him. I walked in and I saw his face. He was in the back of his shop, and I loved him. Yes, sometimes you'll walk into a certain place and you'll see somebody and God just puts a love in your heart. immediately for that person. And so I looked at every music box in his shop over and over because they were beautiful, but because I wanted him to come out. I wanted him to come out from behind that counter. And he did after, I don't know, half an hour or more. And then I spent another probably half an hour asking him, how do you do this? And this is magnificent. And how do you make it sound this way? And how did you get started? And after a while, he's like, who are you? You know, why do you care? And then it's a way to witness. I found that's the best way for me. Dawson Trotman, who is one of the head guys at Navigators, I don't know if he said something one time, and I've always kept it to heart. I work my way around the rim of a person's life until I find a crack. Now, a lot of you young guys, let me explain something. You hear me here right now, you know, waxing prophetically and preaching kind of hard. That's not all the time. You know, I'm a completely different person than what most people see on YouTube. Right now, I've been going to an MMA gym and hanging out. Why? Because there's a bunch of guys in there that they're never going to go to church. And they'll never come to hear about Jesus. And I'm not going in there and saying, you know, you guys this is demonic, you're beating each other senseless. Well, that's not going to help them. I'm just there, and now I've had opportunities to share the gospel and things like that. You know, if a girl, this happened one time, you know, a girl sat down beside me, and I'm an old preacher, and I'm sitting on this stool at a burger bar place, and this girl sits down, and she had spikes everywhere. I've never seen anything like it, through her nose, her ears, everything. And I just kind of sat there, and I kind of was looking at her, and I wanted her to see that I was looking at her. I was kind of going like this, and she finally looked at me, and I said, "Can I ask you a question?" She said, "Sure." I said, "Did that hurt when you did that?" And she goes, "It hurt like blankety blank." I said, "Well, it's amazing, you know. I mean, what am I going to say? It's amazing." I don't care that she's got earrings and spikes everywhere. I see my daughter. You see, here's the thing. You know, love. In the new covenant, love isn't something. It's everything. And sometime in love, yeah, you have to preach hard. But love is just caring about people. You know, everybody wants to talk about themselves. The only problem is nobody wants to listen. If you will listen to people talk about themselves, you'll earn the right. I had a guy one time who told me, he said, "You have sat here," he was a grumpy old man. He said, "You have sat here for an hour and a half and listened to me talk about everything. Now, what do you want to tell me?" You've earned the right. You know, and that's the thing, guys. You know, if you've called to be a street preacher, just make sure that people really see that you love, that you really love. You know, you weren't called just to be rude to people. And I've also, when I'm on a campus, students walk by and I'll just do this. I'll hold out a tract and I'll say, "It would mean the world to me if you would take this." There's a guy, he just died. He was at the University of Tennessee. His name's Saul, and he's in heaven now. And he was a street preacher, evangelist, just on campus. He just walked around campus. He was so loving that when the administration decided he couldn't come back, the president of the Atheist Society went into administration raging and angry, saying, "You can't do this to Saul. He's the lovingest guy in the world and he's not hurting anybody." And I think that love, guys, I'm not trying to sound soupy, but if I could go back in the 30 years of my ministry and change anything, it would have been greater demonstrations of love. Greater demonstrations of love. And another thing, I know I'm rambling on, but this is about evangelism. Here's something. Before I was a Christian, if I saw someone sitting on a park bench and I wanted to sit down there, I didn't feel uncomfortable. I sit down there, talk to them, about anything while I'm sitting at the park bench. After I became a Christian, if I saw somebody sitting on a park bench, I'd just freak out. because I was like, I got to witness to him. I got to witness to him. So I walk over there. I'm sweating profusely. They think I'm like out of my mind or something. Children of the Corn or something. And I realized one day I don't have to do that. That first of all, the first thing I should do is I should pray according to Colossians 4, 2 through 4. Pray that God will give you an open door. Now don't pray that, because He will give you an open door. And then I realized I never have to kick down a door, and I never have to be sneaky to get through a door. I've prayed for God to open up a door, and I will sit down and just talk to people about what they want to talk about. Just get in a conversation. And if the door doesn't seem to open, and it seems the right time, I'll say, look, I know we've talked for a while, and I just want you to know that I'm a Christian, and I would like to be able to share with you my faith for just a few minutes before I go. And most people say, okay. But I was on an airplane several years ago, and I said that to a man, and he got so mad at me. He said, I don't want to hear your God. I don't want to hear. Up until that point, we were having a great conversation. And he said, I don't want to hear about your God. At that moment, you know what I did? I shut my mouth, and I kept talking to him about what he wanted to talk about. I didn't badger him. I didn't want him to get off the plane and go to the airport bar with all his other buddies and say, I was accosted by an evangelical. So I just continued to talk to him. And when we got up, when the plane landed and we got up, he got up before me and he went in the overhead to reach his bag. And there were like 2 or 3 people between us at that time. And he looked back at me and he said like this, he goes, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Now, I didn't get to witness to him, but I know God used that. I know God used that. So kindness. Converse with people because you care about them. I handed a tract to a guy at a university when I had first gotten saved, and it was a lesson I'll never forget. And he turned around, he took the tract, he looked at it, and he goes, do you really care about me? Are you just trying to win me? Will you become my friend? Will you help me? Do you see that? And honestly, I was just trying to win him. I didn't want to become his friend. So, yeah. Next question.